Hello and welcome to the Deercast podcast with Tom and Harry.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 9 of the Deercast. We have got a very special guest with us today, special because all of you have actually requested for him to be here. So if you remember, we put out on Instagram a poll as to which guests you wanted to see coming on the Deercast in the future, and quite a few of you named this very special man. So today, without further ado, we have with us Chris Rogers, Deer Manager on the Euston Estate over in East Anglia. Welcome, Chris.
Hi guys, yeah, thanks for having me. It must have been a very quiet week when you're doing that poll on Instagram, I reckon.
You do yourself a disservice.
Well, it's I try and sort of keep my head below the parapet as much as possible, but the last few years it's had to do a little bit more in the public eye. So I'm sort of shy and retiring type that's having to do a little bit more. So
you're famous on YouTube thanks to the SCTV episodes now, so you better get used to the limelight.
Well, they've been going quite well, I think. I mean, we've been doing that just over a year, so I think we've got sort of 13-14 episodes in the can now. So and it's been good. I mean, I sort of ummed and ahed about doing it. There's always the concern that you're sort of putting yourself out there, and you're going to get some sort of negative press or whatever from various sections of the public. But I had a chat with the owner of the estate where I work, and we sort of look at it from a very much a point of view of trying to show best practice to promote deer stalking, deer management, and shooting generally in a sort of professional way, so that if people that aren't into field sports and wildlife management see it, hopefully they can learn something from it and realise that we're not all really nasty people like some in the media would sort of portray us as.
Yeah. And if you don't mind me asking, have you had any negative feedback after those episodes?
Not at the moment, touching some wood as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
No, we haven't at the moment. I mean, I guess you sort of go into that expecting that eventually someone's going to latch onto it and you get a bit of stick. But I think everything we do is pretty justifiable. We're trying to explain why we're shooting individual animals, and I think we probably show on film a lot more animals than we shoot. So I don't think anyone can say that we're out there trying to sort of hunt down the last deer that's standing.
Yeah. And so where was the sort of start for you then for deer stalking? Where did you learn all your skills?
I went to I was quite lucky as a kid. My father was quite into horse riding, so he got me and my brother into horse riding quite young, just so he could do it. And so we went through the pony club thing or whatever, and we ended up going out hunting with our local hunt, which was the Vale of Aylesbury in those days. And I met a farmer's son on that. They had a little estate near Tring, and so I used to go over there and razz about in Land Rovers and ride motorbikes or whatever, and obviously they had a small shoot on there, so we used to go around with air rifles and then shotguns, and then sort of got into shooting that way really, and at the same time I was quite into fishing and got into fly fishing, and the guy that sort of I did my schoolwork experience with, he was a fishery manager, and he said, well, if you're interested in doing field sports type jobs, then go to agricultural college. So I went to Sparsholt near Winchester in Hampshire, which at the time was the place to go for gamekeeping. Sort of everyone in my generation pretty much went to Sparsholt to get their qualifications, and then on the course I did, or one of the courses I did, you had to do a year out in the industry to get some extra experience, and I figured that I didn't have any deer experience, so I'd go and do that in case I needed it along with the gamekeeping job, and then found that I enjoyed it a lot more than sort of modern commercial pheasant shooting gamekeeping, and sort of switched on to deer in the final year. So I specialised in deer management and conservation, and was lucky enough, sort of through contacts from my year out from college to get a job when I left college, and pretty much went straight into the industry. So that was 2000 I left college.
Wow.
So 22 years plus, another year out, and so I've been doing it a while anyway,
And that, I think it was, I might be sort of slightly ahead of myself in terms of going into the questions, but the route that you've taken to get into professional full-time deer manager, do you think there's still that route available for others that are looking to do the same, or do you think that's a slightly sort of historic thing now? Do you think there's a different way into the industry, or?
I think it's still a case of, I was lucky enough to get my first job because of doing my year out with a particular person. I think it's all countryside jobs to a certain extent is a case of who you know rather than what you know, particularly with sort of conventional gamekeeping, I think there were never a lot of jobs in England for professional deer managers anyway, and there's probably, certainly no more jobs than there were back then, because there's a lot of guys out there, guys and girls, doing it recreationally, and small estates obviously just can't afford to employ a dedicated deer person. So if you're lucky, you can go into gamekeeping and then do some deer management as part of that job. But I think really, I think the best way, if you're, someone that's thinking about what you're going to do after school, and you're thinking about some sort of deer management, it was something that I didn't do, and I regret it. I think you really want to look to go to Scotland and go on the Highland estates and do some sort of seasonal gillying work, and if you've got a couple of years of that under your belt, you might get a job out of it up there. But as a minimum, if someone does want to employ some sort of deer manager and you've got that on your CV, it's pretty good, because if you can stick the weather and the physicality of Scotland, and let's face it, they're dragging deer off hills, whereas I go and pick a deer up with my truck, So if you're looking at someone that's capable of doing the job, then Scotland looks great on the CV.
Would you recommend, if someone came to you and said, I want to do deer management, would you say still go to Sparta or go to wherever and do a course, or would you say go straight to Scotland and learn the sort of old-fashioned way, if you like?
I'm not completely up on it, but I'm pretty sure that all these colleges now, they're changing a lot the courses they offer. So there isn't really the full-time courses that I was doing between 96 and 2000. I think it's gone to more apprenticeship type stuff. So you're really looking at getting an apprenticeship role on an estate, and then you'll go and do a few weeks at college throughout the year to sort of do the qualifications and some of the more in-depth theory stuff. So I think really, it's like all things in life. If you're really interested in doing something, then you've got to push yourself forward to the local estate or farm. You'll get knocked back if you're not known, but you just got to keep pushing, and eventually someone will hopefully give you a chance, and then you just go on from there, really.
So where you are currently on Euston, I always get very jealous when I watch your SCTV episodes, because am I right in saying you've got muntjac, fallow, red, roe, and possibly some Chinese as well?
Yeah. So we've got the red and roe on the estate, which obviously are two native deer, or truly native deer. We've got a lot of muntjac, obviously, as everywhere has in East Anglia. And then we have fallow on a boundary area, which is sort of really just crop raiding at night. They're not properly residential, so we just sort of pick them up when we can, really. And then we have an area on the Norfolk Broads, which belongs to a family member of the owner, where we can go and shoot some Chinese water deer with clients that want to do that. So I mean, we don't manage that area for the Chinese water deer like we do the estate. It's more of, we can go up there and shoot some as a additional thing to, the commercial stalking we do at Euston. I think, I mean, maybe in 5-10 years time, we'll probably have, a population of Chinese water deer on the estate. They're not very far away. So it just depends if, a few get through the net, really.
And is that part of your management plan, or do you just feel like they will naturally move through as they sort of do elsewhere?
Yeah, I think they'll just naturally move into the area. I mean, I think we're at a stage now where we've already got 4 species of deer on the estate. Really the estate only want the red and roe because they're truly native. So we wouldn't really be encouraging the Chinese water deer. I think it's like where these deer spread out across the whole area. They'll just get to a saturation point where, they'll just push on, and then you make a decision about how you're going to manage them once they're there, really.
And you might not want to answer this question, but in terms of numbers, to give everyone a sort of rough indication of how many deer you guys have got, what are your sort of cull numbers in a year, as in total? You don't have to sort of break it down by species. What's a year in the life of, how many deer does your larder see, for example?
Yeah, I mean, we have shot more sort of year on year, really. Since I started, I've been here 17 years now. So I think we're running at just under 500 a year. And when I say a year, so I class our year as a sort of a yearly season. So that's from the 1st of April, when the roebucks come in, until the end of March the following year, when all the females finish. So that's our sort of traditional year. It's a fair number.
It keeps you busy, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it's more than one a day, isn't it? So yeah.
And is it just you doing it, or have you got an underkeeper, or do you draft in sort of help from a syndicate, or?
No, it's I mean, so most of the not all of them, but the majority of deer that we shoot is done with paying clients, because obviously I've got to justify my employment on the estate. And we can take out multiple clients because I've got local guys that will come and guide for us. But yeah, it's just me and sort of people that come in when I need extra help, if that makes sense. So I mean, I'll shoot a percentage of the deer myself, in sort of maybe areas that are difficult to stalk with clients, or areas that are sort of close to roads where you have to be very careful about how you're going to shoot. Maybe some of the species, as you shoot them through the winter, they get harder to stalk. So obviously, you might be taking slightly longer shots than you'd want a novice client to take. So yeah, I mean, I'll shoot a few, but the majority of what we do is done by paying clients under supervision. So.
And you mentioned a sort of upward trend in the number of deer in general that you've shot. Do you think that's an increase in the general population of deer where you are?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I'd like to think it's not deer increasing from our population, but there's just so many deer, in the whole region and area, and a lot of the UK, that everyone you shoot, more just move in. Particularly with muntjac. The red deer that we have, they're quite sort of, transitory in terms of, if other people shoot a lot out of a group, then, they run off 2 or 3 estates away. So it just depends what other people are doing as well with those herding species and how they move around the landscape. So,
And have you noticed a difference in species in terms of is there one that's, growing in number a lot more than another, or is it sort of every species are kind of on an upward trend?
I wouldn't say it's sort of one more than another, really. I mean, the roe are fairly stable, I would say, across sort of most of the region, because they're fairly easy to manage. They stand out in the fields and they sit out, and you see that group there all the time, so you can go and take a few out of it if you need to. The muntjac, obviously, the more you shoot, the sort of more space you make for more to move in across the boundary from other places. And although we've got a couple of big estates on our boundary, there's quite a lot of the boundary that's sort of smaller farms that aren't shot at all. So you're always going to get an influx of muntjac from there. And the fallow and red, they just move around more depending on what gets shot in other areas, basically. Everyone that's got herd and deer will know that if they get too much pressure, they just move somewhere else. It's not that you really get on top of the numbers, you just push them somewhere else, or they come onto you from somewhere else. So they're the sort of difficult ones, really.
And the 500 that you shoot a year, are they all game dealer, or are you doing some processing and butchery yourselves, or how do you...
So we don't do any processing ourselves. Apart from obviously I'll cut some up for myself. Everything that we shoot tends to go to the game dealer. Although a lot of the clients that come, they now take the carcasses home as well, which is a definite change. When I started, 20 years ago or whatever, 22 years ago, people were still coming, stalking because they liked the stalking hunting element of it, and of course they ate venison back then as well, but now we're getting a lot of beginners coming into it just because they want to get their own meat, butcher it themselves, make it into stuff. They want to know where their meats come from. So I'd say that probably very roughly, without working it out properly, I would imagine that at least sort of 40% of the cull is bought by clients.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, muntjac are ideal for that because obviously there's not a huge amount of meat, so you can handle it and store it, quite well.
That's obviously a lot more than I thought, actually.
Yeah, that's a really impressive number.
So I mean, we'll if people are really don't know what they're doing, then I'll show them how to skin it and cut it into the main bits for them. But the good thing with muntjac is there's not, there aren't that many cuts on them. You've just got 2 back legs and 2 loins. Everything we shoot is through the chest anyway, so usually the shoulders are not a lot of use really. It's a nice small amount of meat that they can stick in their domestic freezer at home, and then come back in a month's time and shoot another one.
Yeah, amazing. What sort of clients have you do you have a lot of English clients, or do you see a lot of foreign clients coming in to sort of shoot bucks and that kind of thing, or what's your spread?
It's predominantly British clients that come for cull stalking, so females and small males, sort of more, or meat hunting, I suppose you'd call it. We get a few foreign clients. Obviously COVID put a stop to that for several years. But we don't do, we're taking people out to manage the population and try and sort of cover costs at the same time, rather than we're not out and out trying to sell animals, for the highest value possible. So we, a lot of the guys that travel from abroad, they would like to come and shoot a representative buck, or something with a decent set of antlers. But we'd just rather get the job done properly when we're there, and not sort of spend too much time messing about with individuals. So we do a few, I suppose you call them trophy hunts or whatever, but it's not a huge part of what we do.
And if you had to say your favourite, whether it's on your own or with a client, do you prefer being out on your own, or do you get more enjoyment or satisfaction from taking someone else out?
I mean, I do enjoy hunting on my own, and but the thing is when you've been on a estate for 17 years, there's not a lot that surprises you. You've sort of seen all the deer in all the different places, and you've done all the different stalks to get to them, so you know what to do and how it's going to work. Generally, it always works out. But yeah, I mean, I get more enjoyment out of seeing a a novice person come out, shoot their first deer or shoot their first few, and that means way more to them than obviously me just going out and doing the job. So it's nice to take people out. I mean, obviously sometimes you kind of think, well, it would be easier if I was on my own and I didn't have paying clients, but I suppose having taken paying clients out for pretty much all those 22 years, I think if I didn't have clients out with me, you'd actually find it quite boring being out on your own. So,
Excellent. So I'm conscious we've asked you, or started asking you, quite a lot of questions, and some of the listeners have sent in some of their own. So I'm gonna, and one of them is quite sort of topical to this. This is from Ian Richardson, and he said, "What deer do you enjoy stalking the most at the Euston Estate?"
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they've each got their own little sort of characteristics, and some are more challenging than others for various things. But I mean, muntjac are a massive problem if you've got them in very high numbers. But I don't think you can beat sort of muntjac stalking really. In the woodland, particularly if you're looking for an individual, old animal like an old buck or something, it's in that sort of territory. But you've either got to wait for it to come out of those brambles, or you've got to go in and try and spot it before it spots you. Obviously they're quite handy because they're not very heavy to get out. But I think muntjac are generally probably the most enjoyable out of the lot. I find that roe are fairly easy, so I don't find them overly challenging. The red are lovely to look at. They're an amazing animal, and they can be fun to stalk, but it tends to be a bit like the fallow. You're out sort of first thing in the morning trying to catch them going back into the wood, or you're out, last thing in the afternoon or evening waiting for them to come out of the wood. So it's not as much of a hunt as you'd perhaps expect, whereas obviously in Scotland you're out stalking all day. And the Chinese are a bit different, but they tend to just sort of stand and sit out in the middle of fields and look at you. So it's a case of trying to get as close as you can, and then generally taking a longer shot than you perhaps would on the other species. I think muntjac takes some beating really.
Mm-hmm. I would totally agree. Yeah, for me anyway.
Yeah, they are a major problem, and they're non-native, and we don't know all of that. But I mean, if it wasn't for muntjac, then a lot of people wouldn't have the deer stalking they've got now. So they're a great sort of introductory species to going on to doing more deer hunting in the UK and around the world, really, aren't they?
As you say, they're pocket size as well, so they're more accessible for, I don't know, people who haven't got huge chillers and chest freezers and all the rest of it. You can stick it in your normal sort of freezer at home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they're not easy to stalk though, aren't they? I mean, they're for me anyway. I've struggled to stalk muntjac more than they're harder than fallow for me anyway, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you've got high densities, then obviously you just wander along and wait for one to cross. But like I say, if you're going for that individual animal that is there, then that's the challenge really. And quite often we say to people, if we do have foreign people over for coal stalking, for other things, and we'll say to them, look, if you're interested in taking a big old buck for the wall, if you see one, take it, because you can guarantee if you come back in the future to try and find that one, it'll be 10 times harder.
Absolutely. And interesting, because you sort of mentioned there taking a long shot. So for you, what would be a long shot? That's just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, with clients, we try to get everyone. I mean, it's deer stalking, not shooting. So, I mean, we try and get everybody as close as possible. And, I've got all the kit and the bells and whistles, but even when I'm out stalking myself, I want to get as close as possible. So I'd say that, our average shots are still, probably 80, 100 meters, 120 meters. If we've got a client that we've had out a few times, obviously we've got to know their capabilities. Then you might sort of go 150 meters, and very occasionally, if it's the right situation, we might shoot at 200 meters. But yeah, generally for everything, 200 meters for us is a long shot. Pretty flat ground in East Anglia, so if you sort of tend to get much out past 200 meters, then you lose a lot backstop anyway. So yeah.
I just asked because I didn't know with sort of like big open fields whether you actually would struggle to get the cover to get close enough to something to close the distance, and actually whether you were going to say, I don't know, average shot is 150, 200 meters and a long shot's 250 to 300, for example, or something. That sounds as though that's not necessarily a problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, with the species, with the roe, you can get fairly close to those sort of dawn and dusk, even if they're sat right out in the middle of a field, as long as you've got the wind right, maybe a bit of sort of tree cover behind you or something. So we can generally get, within 150 meters of those. Like I say, the herding species are a bit more of a challenge, particularly once they've been shot at a few times by us and other people. But it's just the reality of, it might be that occasionally I'll take a longer shot than 200 meters on the red deer, but we probably wouldn't let clients do that. And when you are shooting them, you've got a much bigger target to hit. But the situation's got to be right, and there's no point just sort of lashing shots at stuff and hoping it's going to work. You've got to be 100% sure you're going to hit it at those slightly longer distances. Otherwise, you're just opening yourself up for error and problems. And that's the problem with long range shooting, as we all know. If you shoot something at 100 meters and unfortunately it's not a great shot, then it maybe runs to 150 meters and you get another shot at it, hopefully. Once you start going at 200 meters and it runs 250 meters, or 300 meters and it runs 350, 400 meters, you really have got a problem then to try and get that rectified as quick as possible. Particularly when you've got flat ground, and you just lose any chance of a safe shot, So, and the thing is with guiding, everything that we do as guides is to minimise the chances of the clients, having a mistake or something going wrong. So it's all about getting your client as close as possible. It's about getting the most stable rest you can. So, if you can get on the bipod, get on the bipod. If you can't do that, then obviously take quad sticks out rather than a tripod. And ultimately, if the client isn't happy shooting at whatever distance, or you look at someone while they're lining up on the deer and you kind of get a feeling that they don't feel confident, then you just let it go and go on for another one, or come back another time. So
What would be if I said to you, I'm coming as a client to come and visit, what would your kind of top three tips to me be in terms of sort of prep?
Well, I mean, I think it's obviously, check your rifle, make sure it's fine. You'd be surprised how many people, turn up and say the rifle was zeroed, and then you go down the range and it's not zeroed, or it's not quite right, and then you ask them when they last used it and it was, a year ago or something. So yeah, it's just, practice a lot. I mean, we're fairly easygoing ground, but you'd be surprised again how many people are, not overly fit. And because we've got big fields, we do quite a lot of walking. So yeah, I think sort of for all types of hunting, be as fit as you can and you'll enjoy it a lot more. I think the other one is sort of, it goes with the zeroing, but it's just, practice with your kit. If you've got a pair of sticks, practice putting the rifle on them, practice setting them up, because you'll be surprised how many people, buy some kit and just go straight out with it the next day. And of course, that sort of 20-second moment arrives, and the sticks don't open properly, or they fall on the floor, or and there's a lot of
stuff like that.
Yeah, and a lot of practice people can do, is just dry firing the rifle, on the bipod, on the sticks. You don't always have to be shooting ammunition to practice. If you can practice dry firing a lot, then you'll soon realise, looking at a leaf somewhere, that whether you'd have pulled the shot or not. So yeah.
Tips. Conscious that we need to rack through a few more questions, and we've had one from Aberdeenshire Field Sports, I think. and he's asked, or she, what would your dream hunt be? And for the benefit of the listener, behind Chris, he's in this amazing room with, I think, a moose antler and a quite impressive head of a red stag and some roebuck. So I'm quite interested to see what it's going to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a funny one. So I'm in my man room, which is where I obviously do my admin stuff and some head measuring stuff like that. And
is it a safe space? Is that what you're trying to say?
It is a bit of a safe space, only because I can hear, my wife or children approaching, so I can, turn the YouTube off and look like I've been doing it. But yeah, I mean, it's I always said that I'd never have any sort of heads of deer that I hadn't shot myself, but when I got into head measuring and you get a bit more interested in different species, then you end up sort of collecting bits and bobs and people realize you're interested. So there's a European elk behind me which someone gave me from some hunt that nobody knows when it was or where it was years ago. There's an antique, it looks like a red, but it's like a North American elk or wapiti. So yeah, and then there's various other bits and bobs, and then there's some heads from the estate as well. But I don't know, I mean, my dream hunt, it's a funny one really. I've sort of, obviously, there'd be sort of amazing things to do. I think my dream hunts are really like the mountain stuff, which I've done a chamois and a mouflon, which wasn't overly difficult, but you're just in a nice environment, and you do need a sort of fairly reasonable standard of fitness to go and do it. So I think if you're sort of thinking of doing a mountain hunt, you need to do it while you're relatively young and relatively fit, because a lot of hunts you can do, driven boar shooting or even some of the Africa stuff, which you can do when you're a bit older in life and less fit. So yeah, but I mean, I suppose it's sort of probably, if someone said, here's a load of money, go and do something now, it would either be some sort of ibex somewhere in, Kazakhstan or something, or maybe even go to North America and go and do something in there, like a wilderness type hunt, just to get away from it all, really. The UK is so busy, isn't it? And then we're always pretty much stalking with traffic noise in the background and, farm machinery. That. So anywhere where you can get away from that and you don't have any signal, and you feel like you've really earned the animal you shoot rather than just wandering around a corner and bowling something over.
Yeah. And I've been trawling your Instagram, and am I right in thinking you went to Zimbabwe earlier in the year?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was lucky enough. A really good friend of mine, he was going on safari out there. He asked me if I want to, go along to see how it all went down. And we were supposed to do that in 2020 actually, but obviously the dreaded C word cropped up, and put it back 2 years later. But that was amazing. It was a great trip, and we saw loads of animals, and got close to a lot of stuff. And it was. I was just saying you can do Africa when you get a bit older, but I mean, it was still fairly physical. There was a lot of walking. It was quite hot, but obviously it's not quite as physical as, clambering up a mountain. So
very cool.
Yeah,
but I'm very, very jealous.
Yeah.
So the next question, and I haven't actually written down who asked this one, so whoever did, I'm really sorry. Is they've said, do you use a thermal spotter, and do you think thermal imaging is necessary for deer stalking? Now, depending on how you answer this, I'm potentially going to cry, because I have just bought myself a thermal spotter, bitten the bullet and bought one. So treat me gently, Chris.
Well, I mean, I think look, I mean, I do have a thermal spotter and I carry it with me. I try not to use it unless I really have to. I think there's two situations. I mean, you kind of talk about deer stalking, and then there's deer management. And I would say that deer stalking is more of a sort of recreational side of things. So if we take a client out, although we're doing deer management and we're doing, shooting deer for the cull, it's more of a recreational situation. So some clients don't actually like me to use it anyway because they feel like it's cheating or whatever. And they're paying for the outing, so it's really up to them. Other people don't mind. They, rather we use it and shoot an animal than not. But I think that the only trouble with them is I try not to use it all the time because you tend to, they're so easy to spot deer for obvious reasons, and they are fantastic. But you then become reliant on the technology. And my only concern with a lot of people that are getting into deer stalking now is that they're almost going out and buying a cheap pair of binos, and then they're going to buy a thermal, and they're sort of really learning to stalk with thermal rather than, their eyes, and learning sort of fieldcraft. I think probably quite relevant when people, shoot an animal. Obviously, it runs for however far and then falls over. And I think people, I don't know. I worry that people are losing the ability to, blood trail a deer or look for signs of the deer because they just reach for the thermal, look round with it. 9 times out of 10, you find it with a thermal straight away. But, there's always that occasion where it runs behind a tree. You didn't think it was going to go that direction, and you sort of scan round and maybe you think you've missed it when actually it's laid there all along. So I think, thermals are great. And from a deer management point of view, where you need to cull as many deer as possible, then obviously, use a thermal. So it just depends how, not ethical, because it's not unethical, but I think it just depends how, you want to, the style of hunting you want to do yourself and how you want to hunt your animals, if you see what I mean. But thermals are great, but I'd still recommend that people go and get a really decent pair of binoculars to start with, rather than a poor pair of binoculars and a thermal.
What people will ask, what thermal do you use?
Well, I mean, I actually came quite late to thermal. So the first thermal I bought was, I don't even know the model of it. It was one of the Pulsar ones, which is, quite a poor quality image now. And then, but I'm now using the Swarovski thermal, which is really designed more of an add-on to the scope for shooting at night. They've obviously not in the UK, but they really designed it for their European hunters that are shooting wild boar at night. So it is a great thermal, but it's sort of probably better suited as an add-on to a scope rather than a standalone handheld thermal.
I didn't realise Swarovski made a thermal, but I imagine it is the absolute bee's knees. If it's anything else like any of the other Swarovski products, I'm guessing.
Yeah. No, I mean it does the job, but there's obviously a lot of other, brands out there, and so people and what one person likes, another person doesn't like. So it's worth looking around and finding what suits you.
Okay. And speaking of kit, what's your, say, like deer management, should we say, sort of setup? What do you take out with you, rifle wise, binocular wise?
So I mean, we've got my personal rifles, a Blaser R8, so a 243 and a 3006. On the estate, we have a 308 rifle as the estate rifle. They are all now on Swarovski scopes. I mean, nearly all scopes now you buy are variable, so they're all variable scopes. Oh, you there?
Yeah. Oh, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all on. They're all Swarovski scopes, all variable scopes. I mean, when I started, everyone was on 6x42 scopes that were fixed and 8x56 scopes. But I mean, I always had variable scopes as a professional, which, are handy if there is a problem with a deer and you've got to, put it down at a very close range, you can wind it right back to 1 or 2 times magnification. Obviously Swarovski binoculars, mine are 10 times magnification, for sort of seeing as much detail as possible. But they're probably a bit big for what a lot of people need. Lucky enough to, be involved with the filming with a few different brands. So, we have Harkila clothing, which keeps me warm and dry, obviously. That's it really.
And ammunition wise, and I saw your plea on, I think it was Instagram the other day, because you were coming to the end of your Barnes bullets, which I quite enjoyed your post where I think you said, Dear Barnes, my rifle likes your bullets, I like your bullets, but I can't find any or something. Please send help or something like that. So you were on Barnes Copper, I'm guessing, and are you still on Barnes? Did Barnes answer the call for help?
Well, funnily enough, they didn't. But a tin pot.
Thanks, Barnes. We'll call them out now. Yeah, come on, Barnes.
A tin pot deerstalker in the UK isn't quite on their radar, but I mean, obviously we switched over to copper. Trying to think what it was, sort of a couple of years ago now, I suppose. I went on it sort of earlier than all these announcements that the game dealers wanted us to go lead free, just to sort of make sure I found a round that all my different rifles liked. And also make sure I could buy enough of them, because obviously supply's been a big issue, and that's still the issue with the Barnes ammo that I was using my 3006. So I got down to like my last 10 rounds, and there still is no sort of idea when any's coming in the country. So I've had to switch on to Seiko. I think it's the Seiko blade for the 3006. The 243 is on Federal. The Estate rifle 308 is on Gecko. So it's the trouble is with all this ammo is, even if you like one particular brand and the idea of their bullet, if it doesn't like your rifle, then it's no good. So I'm just using whatever the rifle's like, really.
Is that the Gecko tin stuff? The non-toxic?
Yeah, it's like 136 grain, I think, something like that. The trouble is, I'm not really interested in going down the reloading route or anything. So I don't have time, and I don't really have the interest. And if you shop around and try different boxes of ammunition, then you'll generally find one that shoots sort of more than well enough for chest shooting deer at various distances. Obviously, if you've got.
I was going to say, having sort of 3 different copper projectiles, if you like, in different calibers, what have you found, having switched from lead with all of them? Do they all seem to perform similar, or?
I think there's some differences with lead, which I think firstly we have to go lead free, because I think whatever everyone thinks about it, it's just a PR disaster if we don't. And I think people that are coming into the sort of deer stalking management side of things now, obviously they'll just be buying copper straight off, so they'll not really see the issue with it. I mean, it obviously does kill stuff, but it does behave a little bit differently to lead. It doesn't put sort of as big a holes in the deer that it used to. Reduce blood trails, stuff like that. And I don't think it doesn't quite give you the margin of error that lead used to, because it was sort of seemed to be a bit heavier hitting and gave you slightly bigger exit holes and stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you put it in the right place, then obviously it does the job. And I'm finding that, I think me and most people are finding that, rather than shooting behind the shoulders like we would with lead, it's probably a case of shooting more through the shoulder, and try to get as much bone on the way in to, try and put the animal down as quick as possible, really.
Yeah. And what about sort of meat damage? What have you found meat damage wise?
I mean, to be honest, because a lot of our stuff goes off to the dealer, the majority of it, we don't really, other than looking inside the carcass, there's not a lot of feedback I can really give. I would say that it seems to sort of blow blood sort of between the shoots of muscle a bit more. But you don't get as big a hole, so on the bigger deer there's probably less meat damage. The game dealer certainly hasn't sort of complained about any of the carcasses, but for us it's we never want to waste a carcass, but for us producing a headshot or neck shot carcass isn't the name of the game. We want to shoot stuff through the shoulders, hit the biggest target possible, and obviously making sure that 100 out of the 100 animals we shoot at are down and accounted for, rather than trying to have super clean carcasses in the head and neck and one or two being wounded and going off and dying in a unpleasant way.
That probably ties into a question that Johnny Morris has asked us, because he's commented that on a lot of your SCTV videos you chest shoot. I think it's all of the deer that are on there, and he's asking the question here that I think his game dealer pays the same rate irrespective as to whether an animal is chest, head or neck shot. What would you advocate? Which I appreciate is slightly different because you don't know his circumstances, but from your own experiences, it sounds as though you guys are just chest shot, and that's for ethical reasons as opposed to anything else. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, certainly with all the different clients we have, everybody goes on the range and does a range test to make sure they're, competent to go out shooting. And I don't think we've ever really turned anyone away. So people are generally pretty good. But I mean, if his game dealer's, paying the same for all three different shot placements, then why wouldn't you shoot them in the biggest bit possible? Obviously, some of our carcasses that we send off, the game dealer may deduct some money if the shot's a bit high and it's clipped the saddle, or there's excessive sort of shoulder damage. But again, for us, it's the welfare aspect for us is making sure that all the deer we shoot are dead, rather than trying to produce super clean carcasses.
It's quite interesting and quite refreshing to hear, because I think especially if you go on some of the Facebook groups and some of the forums and all the rest of it, I think especially if you were a newbie to deer stalking or deer management, you'd get the impression that it's head shooting or nothing. It seems to be what everyone's sort of advocating out there. So it's quite nice to hear your opinion on it, really.
Yeah. It's really difficult. It's each their own, isn't it? But I think that certainly with clients, we never sort of let anyone head or neck shoot. Very occasionally I will head and neck shoot something myself. But that's more if I'm in a situation where I'm out stalking a red deer, for example, and obviously you've got a lot bigger head to hit, or a lot bigger brain of a red deer to hit than a muntjac. If I'm close enough and confident enough, then maybe I'll head shoot, the first one to try and get a shot on one or two afterwards.
Yeah.
But I'll, even if I do take a headshot, I'll still revert back to a chest shot the next time. Because the more you do it, the more you push your luck, and eventually it will go wrong. And if you're lucky, you get a shot on the animal. If it's sort of stunned to the ground or as it's running away, if you're unlucky, it just gets away, and obviously, highly unlikely that you're going to find that deer and dispatch it. So, but I mean, each their own. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying, make sure it's the right situation and you're 100% confident, and you know what you're going to do if it goes wrong.
Yeah. And do you do any part culling or anything like that, or are you just doing wild?
So all the deer on the estate are wild. On my year out from college, we did actually do quite a few big deer parks. So I have done some park culling in the past, and I do manage a couple of little sort of small deer pens for people that have got some fallow. But I mean, it's always sort of very much a go in and do the job as quick as possible. It's not obviously it's not really a recreational activity.
I'm sure. Quite stressful.
Conscious of time and not wanting to take up too much of your evening, Chris, so we're going to move on to the next bit of the podcast, which I can already see you giggling about, which is called Bobby's Bits. And for the benefit of any of the listeners that haven't listened before, it's named Bobby's Bits because Harry's brother is called Bobby. Bobby took a year out between school and university, lived at home, wasn't paying any rent, but had a full-time job. So was sort of in that blissful bit of life where you've got all the money in the world and no expenditure, no bills to pay. And he went out and bought lots of deer stalking kit and made all the rest of us very jealous. So we typically now at this point ask our guest if there's any sort of bit of kit you couldn't live without, your favourite bit of kit, or if there's any bit of kit that you're desperately hankering after. Other than some Barnes bullets, I should say.
Well, I obviously don't need them now because obviously, Seiko are the best for my rifle. But yeah, I mean, I think the most important bit of kit I've got for my sort of deer management is the binoculars, really. And it's for me, I got into deer management or deer stalking because I like looking at deer. I'm not massively interested in the rifle side of things. It's just something that I need to do the job with, which is probably why I haven't gone down the sort of reloading route and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, binoculars are probably the best bit of kit, and obviously if I'm ever out driving around or walking around, they're pretty much always on me because you're just always going to see something that you want to have a closer look at. But I mean, I'm really lucky as well. Obviously, got a lot of lovely kit and nice clothing and all that sort of stuff. But there's Swarovski have actually just brought out a new product which I saw a few weeks ago, which is a compact telescope. So rather than a sort of big heavy spotting scope or a long sort of draw tube telescope that you might use in the Highlands, this compact telescope is I don't know, about the size of a bottle of whiskey or something. So it's nice and light and packable.
I think this is the only podcast where you could get away with relating something to the size of a bottle of whiskey and everyone probably knows what you mean.
Yeah. Well, I didn't write down the measurements of it, and I was sort of looking around the man room trying to think of what I could describe the size with. So an average bottle of whiskey size telescope basically. Which comes with a sort of angled eyepiece or a straight eyepiece. So that would be my thing that I would like to get.
Would you take that into the field with you and sort of sit in an eye seat and spot, or is that just more sort of for viewing kind of thing?
I mean, I do sort of use telescopes and spotting scopes when I'm driving around in the truck. So I have like a window mount. So that sort of clips onto the, a window that's sort of up a couple of inches out of the door. That's really great if you're looking at individual animals. So particularly, the roebucks at long distance, if you're trying to work out if it's one you want to take or leave. The red stags, obviously muntjac, but they're quite mobile, so you don't tend to get a lot of time to look at those anyway. And I'll sort of occasionally I'll stalk with a Swarovski sort of draw telescope that has like a carrying strap if I'm out for again those individual animals. But yeah, I think this compact one, what appeals to me is more for when I go and do these a mountain hunt somewhere. It's small and light, and it's takes up a lot less space in your backpack compared to the old-fashioned spotting scopes. So I mean the old spotting scopes still have their place, and they are bigger and more zoom, and but for the size of this compact one, the positives outweigh the negatives of it, really.
There you go, Swarovski. You need to pull your fingers out and get one of these spotting scopes off to Chris, and then when he comes back on the podcast, you can tell everyone how brilliant it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think they're literally just launching it into sort of retailers now. So I think I'll have to get in the queue. So
You never know. I mean, this podcast is quite a big deal, Chris. I think we have all of about 12 listeners, so one of them might be Swarovski. You never know.
Yeah. So I heard you had 13 listeners anyway.
we might have 13 now. Is that you, the 13?
Yeah.
So just for this one.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk to us. We won't keep any more of your time. I know you're a busy man, and I suspect something we didn't even get to talk about is that your wife has probably cooked some sort of delicious venison dish for you for dinner, and we don't want to keep you from that. And you're a very, very lucky man looking at some of the recipes she puts out in all the magazines that she writes for. But thank you very much for coming and joining us. We'd love to have you back again at some point, and hopefully get to meet up with you in person at some point as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and I think it's venison spaghetti bolognese tonight, which is fairly basic but a good staple in our house. And my wife's little cooking page on social media is very good venison. So if anyone wants to go and check that out, then please do. And if you like the idea of some of the recipes on there, they're all just great home cooked food, and nice and simple, and not 5,000 different ingredients from a Michelin star chef. But yeah, no, I'm very lucky, and it's also anyone that works in the sort of rural countryside will know your sort of wives and partners are really important and very supportive. So big shout out to Anna.
Yeah, big shout out. And I absolutely loved the slow cooked pulled venison recipe that she did. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, really good.
Yeah. So brilliant.
Try that.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much for joining us. And to all the listeners out there, I hope you've enjoyed this one. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.